Welcome to SHARS training from TSBS. In this training, we'll discuss the service area requirements for psychological testing, formerly known as assessment services, as well as counseling and psychological services. Psychological testing is activities that are performed for the purpose of determining eligibility for special education. They include an initial assessment that leads to the creation of an IEP, an assessment for a student that has an existing IEP and is then referred for assessment for a different disability, whether that assessment leads to a revised IEP or not, and an assessment that leads to a dismissal from special education. The providers who can submit SHARS billing for psychological testing are LSSPs, licensed psychologists, and licensed psychiatrists. Session notes are not required for psychological testing. However, you must document the billable start time, stop time, total billable minutes, and the type of activity performed during the evaluation. There are two types of evaluations for psychological testing. First, there is an initial evaluation, which is the first time a student is evaluated for special education. This type of evaluation is only billable for SHARS if it leads to the creation of an IEP for the student. If the student does not qualify, then the service is not billable for SHARS. Next, there is the re-evaluation, which is done to determine if the student is to remain in special education or if any changes need to be made to the student's current IEP goals or objectives. Even if the student is dismissed from special education, the service is still billable for SHARS since the student was already enrolled in special education and receiving services. The types of activities that are billable for psychological testing are testing, which always must be done first, and only direct time with the student is billable. Interpretation, which can be done without the student. And report writing, which also can be done without the student present. Please note, writing the IEP is not a billable component of psychological testing. The ARD meeting itself is not billable. Visual impairment assessments and visual screening are not billable SHARS services. Autism evaluations are also reimbursable through the SHARS program. Psychological testing is not reimbursable for virtual or telehealth methods. Now, let's move on to service area requirements for counseling and psychological services. Counseling and psychological services are therapy services provided to help a student with a disability benefit from special education and must be listed in the IEP. SHARS specifically states that for psychological services, only an LSSP, licensed psychologist, and licensed psychiatrist can bill for Medicaid reimbursement. For counseling, the positions that can bill are licensed professional counselors, licensed clinical social workers, and licensed marriage and family therapists. Counseling and psychological services are billable for individual or group therapy sessions. They may be in person or virtual. It's important to remember that when submitting your SHARS claims, the type of therapy you're entering must match the type of service that's prescribed in the ARD. In addition, session notes are required for documentation purposes. Session notes must include billable start time, stop time, total billable minutes, activities performed during the session, student observation, and the related IEP goal and objective. It is recommended by TSBS to record both your billing information and your session notes into your SHARS ticket. Doing this will allow you to report all necessary information in a single form and will follow both state and federal audit requirements. In the event you choose to handwrite session notes prior to entering them into your online billing system, TEA requires that handwritten session notes be kept on file for 7 years. In essence, those handwritten notes are your true session notes and therefore need to be kept for audit purposes. If you don't handwrite session notes during the therapy sessions, but rather enter notes directly into the online billing system as the session occurs, Those notes will serve as your primary session notes, and therefore no secondary documentation will be requested in an audit. School districts may receive reimbursements for emergency psychological services as long as the student's IEP includes a behavioral improvement plan or a behavior modification plan that documents the needs for these emergency services. If in place, the school district can bill for more psychological time than was prescribed in the student's IEP or ARD. Confidentiality is a big concern when recording psychological services. We understand the need for privacy, so TSBS recommends that when you document SHARA sessions, you can be as vague or as specific as necessary. Additionally, private information can be darkened out or redacted. Thank you for watching this training. We appreciate your assistance in your school district's continued success in the SHARS program.